let's just come back together. We're not going to meditate as such, but let's just take a few moments to arrive back in the room and in ourselves. And there'll be many occasions in life where our attention has appeared to leave the present moment, appeared to leave our beingness, or perhaps we even wanted it that way. There'll be many occasions where we are a bit flustered or busy or distracted. And we need to learn how to develop the skill and the habit to bring our attention into the present moment in such a way as it is a beneficial and pleasant experience. So we cannot fight with the present moment and expect it not to fight back. Now we know about sensation. So to come to the present moment steadily, gracefully, gently, and to come without assumption on ourselves and others. Our being is not the place for us to carry out judgment and assault, either on ourselves or others, or on the world, on life, on existence itself. And if we are clear about this, then we can set an internal environment that is not only safe and welcoming, but also clear, clean, and effective. And one that we can rely on. We can rely on our perceptions. We can trust our perceptions. Now notice which elements need to be in play in order for you to feel steady, centered, present, and also nicely expansive and light and harmonious. So just notice where you need to place your consciousness, how you need to use it, and also pay attention to the attitude with which you use it. And once you've got those three things under your belt, then open your eyes and feel that you can maintain that with your eyes open. You feel that you can maintain not just an open-eyed state, but you could carry out a conversation, carry out tasks, whilst maintaining that sense of connection and flow, remembering. And you feel that you have created then, or at least set up the conditions to be in a state where you are best able to make choices, take responsibility, and offer a contribution. So the state of your being will facilitate the use you wish to put it to. So on the screen it says experience, relating and identity, and if we were to take each one of those and cycle through them. And what time is tea break? 3:30? What I want to do is more to, I will address those areas but try to roll it into one like we did with mindset and sensation. First thing I want to touch on, just very briefly, is that the next thing in our lineup is actually form. We haven't talked about form yet. Does anybody think they have ongoing issues with form? Does anyone think, ooh, that's my area? Physical health, attitude to appearance. You don't like it messy? No. Does that include your physical body?
Yeah, so I'm always seeking
to have a bit of order.
Yeah.
A lot of order or a bit? Or just enough?
Well, you know.
Oh, perfection. Oh, not much then. Okay. All right.
Well, you know. Yeah, I suppose I do have issues.
Yeah. Anyone else got a thing with form? Ladies? All right, yeah, come on. Almost every woman I've worked with has got some issues with form.
The feeling of not always being in shape.
Yeah, not being in shape, your appearance, how you look, yeah. Your size, how you present yourself, how appealing you are. We don't have to have thoughts about form to affect form. Here comes another one of my spectacular creations. See if I can do a better job this time. So our form, I know, half wings, half arms, I know. It's an occupational hazard.
Someone do the Sistine Chapel again.
So we imagine that we reside inside this form. So many people will tell you, where does your spirit reside? Oh, in here. They reliably point to this. It's in here somewhere. Well, no surgeon has ever found it. We exist in an energy field where we have an etheric body which mimics our form like this. And around that etheric body is an emotional body which is much more amorphous. Then we can take that black one to be our mental body. And I'm running out of colours. And then we have our heart body. And then we have our higher etheric. We have our higher astral. And then we have our body of higher wisdom, which literally goes off the page. So when I say we are huge, that's what I'm referring to. When I talk about your being, I'm talking about that. When I'm referring to this bit, I say your physical form. Yes, have you noticed that in the language? This is always referred to as the physical, and then this is your being. This is also the extent of your energy field. Some people talk about auras. Auras are not consistent with the energy field because you're just seeing a certain portion of the energy field when you're viewing the aura. And depending on how your perception is configured, you may see one aspect over another. So it's not a complete picture. So there's your physical form there. Now all of these obviously intersect. They are not built on top like this. So the body of high wisdom is not just out here, and your etheric is not just here. So they all intersect inwards, so they go through the physical. So my etheric body is going through my physical and meeting with the other side of my etheric body. My heart body is about here and coming through, and it's this size. So it's like Russian dolls. Everything, when you take your consciousness, I've spoken so often about taking your consciousness. This is what expanding consciousness means. When you take your consciousness out to log on to these outer levels, you can't do that without this being affected. So if your consciousness resides here, everything inside is affected. If it resides here, everything inside is affected, and so on and so forth. So if you want to make sure you haven't missed anything, you have to hold your consciousness in the sort of greatest level, and then everything underneath is affected. So the physical body, you can see, is getting hammered on every level. You cannot do anything without affecting your physical body. The physical body is always affected, yeah, by everything you do. It has a lot of backup. You know, we often think the physical body is vulnerable, helpless, alone, susceptible. Some people even think it's tainted, or flawed, or wrongly designed, and all of that. If you want my opinion, and I'm going to give it to you anyway, I think all that's complete nonsense. And I think it's nonsense because I know the beauty and the perfection that exists here, and I don't see why this should be any different, because it's all one system. You can't have anomalies like that in a system like that. But nevertheless, the physical body has a lot of backup. Where we take our attention to, what we log on to, and you know that these levels are consistent with the levels in the grid, yes? And the energy centers, that's clear now. So wherever you put your attention, if you're in survival, your attention doesn't go further than that. So you haven't given yourself much room for backup. You haven't given yourself another viewpoint. We looked at on the first day that the physical is the 3D. And in order to log on to the things that really affect us most and have some chance at affecting outcomes, we need to be able to move and navigate through space. And this is all the space. There's internal and external. Yeah? We need to be able to navigate through that space. Even though I've drawn it this way, and it looks like we're walking around with all these energy fields on the outside, because there is no direction beyond space-time continuum, those same levels are also accessible within. So there's no such thing as outside, inside, really. I'm just depicting it like that to show you. So you don't have to place your attention somewhere out there geographically in order to access that elevated frequency, because it's also here as well. So you can log on to it anywhere. It's more the intention and the frequency that connects rather than some geographical point. So here you haven't given yourself much backup. You haven't given yourself much to draw on. If this is three-dimensional, and you only take into account what you can immediately feel in your etheric, then you're not giving yourself different angles of perception with which to form a different view. You will feel like a physical body, and your perceptions will be consistent with a physical body, yes? So when your physical body hurts, you will say, I am in pain, and you will feel, the I will be felt very strongly as pain. Yes, so the I will be synonymous with the physical body, and therefore pain has no other reference point than my body hurts, therefore I am in pain. Anyone who's given birth knows that you have to learn how to deal with pain, and there are different ways to compute that in order to transcend it. Okay, so if you are taking into account all of these levels into the physical body, it means each one of these represents not just another frequency, but it represents another perspective. I don't know what's happened to me over lunch, but I obviously left my English in the cafe as well, my eloquence. It adds another perspective, yeah, to your perception. Because these are planes of existence, planes of being, dimensions of being, and every time you add another dimension, you add another whole way of seeing. So by the time you add 7 dimensions to your perception of the physical body, you get a very, 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 very different take than if you just log on to the physical alone. Does that make sense? Yeah? Because you've got 7 other perceptions with which to compute what is happening in the physical body. And all of these perceptions, all of these frequencies govern experience. So it's basically, you've got a lot more choice, you've got a lot more evidence and experience to draw on. So that's why when we meditate and our consciousness is going out here, when we want to sort of stand up and move around and use our physical body again, move into a day-to-day state, it's very important to, kind of remind the physical body, absorb that. Yeah. So, and you almost have to remind it and give it the cue, because it is made of matter, partially, and therefore it has to subscribe to physical laws as well as existential ones. The rest of your energy field only has to answer to existential laws. Your physical body has to answer to physical laws at the same time. Yeah. So, gravity being one of them. Yeah. And to some extent, a time and space-based reality, which is arguable, but we're not going to go into that now. So, if you have patterns which are building up in your field, in your emotional and mental field, they are going to intersect the physical body. The physical body is going to get caught up in them. And it cannot escape them. You cannot have a sensation that does not affect the physical body. The physical body, just because of its location in our energy field, is automatically included in everything. Everything. Interestingly, plants have a physical and an etheric. Animals have a physical, etheric, and a feeling body. And then humans have a physical, etheric, and mental body. It's interesting, isn't it, that as you go up through the kingdoms, they add another body. So it doesn't mean that plants and animals are any less divine than we are. I was going to use the word sentient, but it's not quite right. But it does mean that they don't have this extra faculty, and they don't have conscious choice in the same way we do, to be able to place their attention at will throughout their field and be able to access other aspects of being. They're automatically connected. They don't need to, actually. They're automatically connected. It's a prefixed system. But we have that facility because we have a mental body. We have that choice to be able to directly create independent thought and therefore independent experience. We're not duty bound to the experience that is just in the collective. Yeah? So that's what we want to say about the physical body. There is sometimes the idea that if somebody is sick, it's because they just can't get the right thoughts going, or they've got some, pattern, and that's why they're sick. And I think that is far too simplistic. Sometimes illness, and sometimes in the form of cancer can be a real nudge for our consciousness to wake up. So sometimes illness is the doorway to leave this planet and end our physicality. And, we've got to do it somehow. We can't all get run over by a bus. All of those spots are taken. So, we've got to find ways of leaving. And illness is one of them. That the physical body is affected by something and it's time and off it goes. So I would have an expansive take on illness. If you've got hard and fast rules about what it means, and that this illness means that, and that illness means this, then I would say you never know what it is for another person. There is a wisdom to where in our physical body things manifest, but that can also be down to genetic weakness. That our genetic encoding gives us a predisposed weakness. So if illness is going to come out, it can come out there. Also, it's true our thoughts and beliefs can give us a weakness towards things manifesting in a certain way. But the picture, and then you've got to take into account the destiny, the soul, the karma, the lessons for that life. And it's just too much to compute for anyone to tell anyone else what is going on with them definitively. It's so I think we should all steer clear of that and just focus on ourselves. Now, if we are sick, if we are dying even, there is nothing to stop us being in an accepting frame of mind, a peaceful frame of mind. There's nothing to stop us being joyful or cheerful or, wanting to give and share and still contribute to the community. So there are plenty of examples of that. So it doesn't, illness and death do not represent somehow a tragic failure of life. They are just part of life. And they do not determine. Sometimes it's harder to get up, be cheerful and move around if you've just had your leg cut off. But nothing that is insurmountable. So we can overcome most of these things with how we choose to be. And that little bit of extra challenge can sometimes be what we need in order to be determined what it is we want to experience. Yeah? When everything's set up in our favor, we can get a bit lazy. My mother-in-law has not been able to walk freely since the day she was born. She's now almost 70, and is now in a wheelchair and gets around that way. And she is one of the most peaceful, magnanimous, gentle, sweet, kind, and serene people I know. And she has had to overcome enormous hurdles her whole life. And so she's an inspiration. And just when you think, universe has dealt out all it could deal out, one day on the ice, she would get round on 2 sticks for some of her life and be wheeled around for the rest of it. And that was her only little bit of freedom. And one day on the ice a few years ago, slipped, broke both of her legs in multiple places, and now is permanently confined to a wheelchair. And not a flicker of complaint. The tiny, tiny bit of freedom you've ever had is then taken away. You would think that would be justification for at least some grumpiness. But not a flicker of complaint. She went through the whole experience, weeks and weeks and weeks in hospital. They're trying to rebuild. So all of this is just to say that our external circumstances, social, economic, health, otherwise, do not need to determine our mindset and our use of our being. We have a lot more freedom. Clearly that does not look like a picture of freedom, but it could be. Now, I want to talk about experience, and I did have some very nice comprehensive notes that I wanted to take you through. So I'll just have to try and do it from memory. And Ariane, you might need to help me out here. Experience has a lot to do with perception. Now, does memory come before perception? I don't remember. Perception, it also has to do with, obviously, sensation, as we've discovered. I think memory comes first. Perception, sensation. And conclusions and expectations. So these are the elements which make up experience. And we tend to think, I said earlier, that experience is, we use it, unfortunately we don't have a wide enough vocabulary in the English language to create another word. We need to have two different words, one for the sensation that creates experience, so that momentary experience, and another for a sort of overall general experience, because we use the same word and sometimes it's hard to distinguish. But in order for you to have an experience, before you even perceive what is happening in the present moment, your memory is affecting your perception. So think of a time when you sort of run into trouble with someone, or you had like a bit of a fracas with somebody, and maybe you had a bit of a history with this person. Before anyone opened their mouth, before it all kicked off, your memory of that person would be affecting and setting your perception of them. Yeah? So that has a huge part to play on how we use our perception in that moment. So we talk as if we are constantly present and constantly, here comes my saviour. Were they still there? Oh, John, bless you. Let's just see how much nonsense I've been telling them then. I'm curious. No. Sorry, folks. None of this is true. That was just a test. That was just a test for you, Ariane. I'm sorry that you've failed in that. Let's start again. Those things are all happening, by the way. Okay, let's start again. That's the one I was missing. Meaning. Okay. In almost every case, because we weren't born yesterday, history is affecting us. History, as many people have said, is also his story or her story. Our previous experiences are affecting us. They are pre-setting. So when we have a sensation coming from a thought, and I explained it the other way around just now, and it's perfectly true. It is also the other way around, that our perception of the history is affecting the sensation that we feel, the experience we have. It is also true that the sensation we are feeling in the present moment reinforces a perception, so they work off each other. So it does work both ways around. But this is the way I've decided to tell you now. So by the time we get to perception, our perception is often not taking a clean read on our sensation. So the mechanism that I have described to you thus far is when we have almost a completely clean system. We were born yesterday, we just got our whole energy field wiped and our whole memory wiped yesterday, and we showed up today on Earth completely clean and fresh, squeaky clean. Yes? And then, if that were happening, when we had a sensation, it would be a true sensation that related to that moment, yes? And that thought in that moment. But we don't have the opportunity to wipe the slate clean every day. If you remember, the previous paper had that sort of matrix of thought and sensation going all through the energy field. We are walking around not just with one thought sensation, but with millions of them. So we've got an energy field which is already full of patterns. Now, if I look at you just like this, I can see you well. If I look at you through one pattern, some of my view is obscured. If I look at you through two patterns, a lot more of my view is obscured. If I were to create more and more patterns, then my view, even though my vision works, my view is showing me something which is not what I think I'm looking at. Yeah? I'm seeing my patterns, not the person. Yes? So that's how it works when we feel something, but our perception of the pattern is influenced by all of our other experiences and by the history in our field. Now, what happens is, anytime we can't make sense of sensation, and we don't want to stay, we haven't trained ourselves to stay in the present, and, oops, sorry, I made a mess of that. And we don't want to stay in the present and just deal with it, then anytime we feel discomfort, it alerts our mind, we get triggered. So we feel the discomfort, the brain is linked to every part of the body, the feeling mechanism. We feel discomfort, the brain switches on, the mind comes into being and says, what? Yeah, well, the mind is like the fire brigade. What? You know, what do you want me to take care of? What is this discomfort? If we can't understand the discomfort through our perception alone, we need to rely on the mind to tell us what's going on. Because these sensations arise in our physical body is where we think we dwell, or certainly they take place in our being, and we dwell in our being. I can't dwell in Ariane's being as much as I would like to. I can't get inside and be her and live her life. I just can't. I can empathize with her, I can love her, I can hang out with her, but I can't make my conscious will go into her and control her. I just can't do it. I can't be her. So I am stuck being me. I have to be the being that I am. And because I can't escape my being, but my being is full of uncomfortable sensations, the mind is often used to tell us why it's happening. Yeah? So we go through a mental process of rationale as to why things are happening. And that's where we assign meaning to the sensation. Yeah? That is the biggest mistake we can make, is to assign meaning to a sensation. You don't need to assign meaning to a sensation because consciousness is perfectly designed and suited to be able to sink into that sensation and feel it. Consciousness isn't worried. Consciousness is not worried by any sensation, no matter how contracted. Consciousness can sit in the midst of that and feel it, even if it's so tight, it feels like it's going to squeeze the life out of you, like you can't breathe. Consciousness can sit there and say, yes, contracted sensation. It can, if you allow it, if you train it to. What most of the time happens is that consciousness touches it And we've got so many reasons as to, oh, history is repeating itself, this means blah, 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 that we literally leap out of, you know, the flames trying to get away. And the brain says, or the mind says, the brain says, get out of here now, because it's uncomfortable, so it's just a normal reflex. And the mind interprets that get out of here now as there is something wrong. How many of us have ever felt there's something wrong with me? All the time. It is such a pervasive human thought. There is something wrong with me. There is something lacking in me. There is something missing in me. There is something wrong with me. And as we saw earlier, because we believe that our I, our source of life, is synonymous with our humanness, when our humanness is struggling, we feel the I is struggling. And so we think there is something wrong with my I. I am wrong. Yeah? So this is the conclusion. This is the conclusion. Now the conclusion doesn't just say, I am wrong. Sometimes it does. It goes further. It says, I am wrong because. And all of the misperception and mismeaning is then packed into that conclusion. What is a conclusion? Something that is done and dusted, something that we don't question anymore, something that we accept as true. What happens when we accept something as true? It goes down to the subconscious and no longer needs to pass through our conscious mind. So all of the conclusions we have made get stored in the subconscious, whether they are true or not. And I suppose memory, why I had memory at the top is because I was thinking of history, but then memory and history are connected and the cycle goes round again. Yeah? And that's how you can have repeating patterns that exacerbate themselves. So how will I remember this event? If I was consciously present, in the present moment, I remembered the full extent of my being, and I felt a contracted sensation, my consciousness would alert me to the fact, hello, contracted sensation. Okay, boss, got it. I'm noticing the contracted sensation. I'm noticing that, oh, there's a mental component to this contracted sensation. That's interesting. I didn't know I thought that thought, but obviously I do. Here it is. Oh, I must be believing it because the sensation is here. Interesting. Okay, stay with it. What do you want to do now? Well, it doesn't feel particularly pleasant. I think I might shift my attention somewhere else. Okay, shifting attention. Do you have the self-perception that says you're the kind of person that's capable of that? Yeah, I think so. I've done it before. I can do it again. Okay, let's do that then. We'll shift our attention. Where do you want to go? Why not go to the heart? Okay, you can go to the heart. Let's go to the heart. Feel the expansion and the light and the harmony and the heart radiating out. What happens to that sensation? It's lifting, 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 or maybe disappearing. Okay, what do you want to take away from that? Oh, that thought doesn't work for me. Okay, how are you going to store that? That's the conclusion. How are you going to store that? Well, next time I come into, because I've made a conscious choice, a conscious path, a conscious navigation, I now get to store that differently as a memory. Yes? That's how we repattern our field. So I get to say, okay, whenever I notice either that person or that thought or those circumstances again, I'll be able to know that there's some likelihood that will kick off, and if it does, I'll be able to deal with it because I've done it now. But that's not what happens, is it? When we have a contracted sensation, we think, we perceive it through a web of previous patterns and conclusions. We assign the meaning there's something wrong with us. We conclude that it is true. The memory of that event, if we do not deal with it consciously, if we don't navigate through it consciously, and if we don't reconclude, if the same illusion which was present in our history, is still present now, sorry folks, I have to tell you, we exacerbate the pattern and it grows, it gets stronger. So the journey of sensation and feedback and conscious navigation is the only, and I don't feel dogmatic in saying it this way so emphatically, is the only way human beings can repattern their fields. Full stop. Period. It's this mechanism of experience is the only way we can transform, change, do things differently. We cannot keep encountering the same pattern, feeling the same sensation, having the same perception, assigning the same meaning, arriving at the same conclusion, and storing it as memory in the same way, and expect to be any different, can we? We can't. So the whole process of experience is an opportunity to introduce consciousness to the mix, as I just described. So I think we should try that out, don't you? I'm sure we've all got enough raw material to work with. Let's try that out. Give me a glass of water, please. Could you give me a glass of water, please? Thank you so much. Thank you. Breathing in, breathing out. And let's just take a stock check on our being. Let's just see which elements are given, fixed, eternal, we don't have to worry about, and which elements are temporary, changeable, and therefore our responsibility. So let's notice the energy of your being. Notice that your being is in the form of energy. And all you have to do is just sit with it for a few seconds, and you start to notice a little hum, maybe something pulsing, throbbing, vibration of some sort. You can feel almost like something emerging from the mist, that whole energy setup. Present moment. Notice the present moment. Notice that you didn't create the present moment and you can't uncreate it. It is always here. It's not going anywhere. We can't influence the present moment in any way, just in the same way that we can't change the format of our being from energy to something else. We can influence the energy, We can work with it, but we can't change the fact of it. We can't change the design, the nature, or the function. Notice the capacity for thought in the mind. So notice the mind. Notice we have this inbuilt faculty to create or align with thought. We don't have to use it, we don't have to press it into use. The mind, we can just log onto the mind, pure, empty, clear, clean and light, beautiful. We also have the ability to fashion thought. And then when we do so, there is sensation. So notice sensation. We can choose the thoughts, we can choose which ones we entertain, and sensation arises. So we have some effect upon the sensation, but we can't change the fact that sensation arises in response to thought. And we have consciousness. We didn't create this faculty, we can't uncreate it, but we are given it to use. The actual tool of consciousness is already created. Our role is to understand and master its use. And when we notice sensation, we produce experience. Now call into your being an incident, something that was a strong experience for you at the time, something that made a lasting impression on you, something that was big and challenging. And just take a few moments to let that come back into your being. And you'll notice that as it takes up residence in your being, the memory of it will call different aspects of your field into different patterns as you recollect. And this is a normal part of the process. Don't fight that. Let it revisit you. And notice how it took hold of you at the time, and let it take hold of you to the extent that you are able now. Now notice at the time that this event happened, that your perception of it, your noticing of it, your processing of it likely had some history attached to it. even if it happened with somebody that you had never met before, or no one else was involved, then your own prior history is involved. So just notice that as that sensation arose in you of that event, as the various elements of contraction took hold of various aspects of your being, your perception at the time was not coming from a completely clear and clean place. It might have been, your perception might have been preloaded with other events, circumstances, other ideas about who you are, who another person is, how life works, and what's going on. And I want you to notice the conclusion you made. From the meaning you assigned. So if you look at the meaning, even though you didn't register it at the time, there would have been some element that tried to explain to you why that was happening, what it was about. And just see if you can find the conclusion you came away with. And see that it was based upon the meaning you gave to it. The meaning didn't have to be accurate, but it was the explanation your mind arrived at the time, and therefore, for lack of other knowledge, it was the conclusion you accepted as being the rationale. I just want you to notice at this point that we're quite far in terms of thinking we know what's happening and why. I just want you to notice that the whole process from sensation to conclusion can be, and it most often is, flawed for all the reasons we've discussed. So just, you don't have to unravel everything now, but I want you just to notice, at least entertain the idea that this event, your perception of it, even down to the sensation you experience, if it's loaded with expectation, the meaning you gave, the conclusion you arrived at, it doesn't have to be true. But you can accept it as truth. And then notice from that the memory that lives in you until today of that event. Just notice that your memory incorporates not only the original sensation, your memory, if you stretched out your memory and extruded it, you would find all the layers of sensation, perception, meaning, conclusion that collectively form your memory. And so our memories are accurate for what we think happened, but not truthful as to what did happen. So just find that distinction. And then come back to the sensation. Just come back to the event as it's happening. Come back into that raw sensation. Feel it. Don't evacuate your being. Feel the sensation. And just notice it dispassionately as a contracted sensation. Notice your perception. Notice that there'll be elements of this experience, elements of this event, where your attention focused. You weren't reading the entire situation, you'd focused on an element. Notice where your perception went, the bits that it was choosing to look at and read. And now consciously and purposefully expand your perception, expand your seeing faculty, your gaze, right out in every direction, so you can see not only the other person's, if there is another person involved, the full extent of their field, but you can see and feel the full extent of yours. So the being, which is doing the looking now, is coming from a more knowing, a more expansive vantage point. And notice that as you expand your sense of self, so too your perception of the event changes. Just notice how that works. As you expand your sense of self and you keep looking at this event, you'll notice that the very particles engaged in the original contraction are getting uplifted, expanded, lightened, harmonized. And the more expanded your perception, the more reliable it is. Now see if you want to apply any meaning here, or whether you just want to let it be a sensation in response to a thought or belief. Is there any different meaning that you now see in this event that you did not see before? And allow yourself to arrive at a new conclusion. And don't second guess what that should be. Just really deeply look at this event and also stay logged on to the full extent of your being. What are the conclusions? What can you say you know for sure? Remember the parts of you which are eternal and those which are temporary. The eternal parts are unchanging, the temporary parts are changeable. That helps you to see which elements of your experience are created and will pass away, and which ones will reliably stay with you. And now, in this moment, 4th of December 2017, here, Cluny Hill, in the beach room, What is your memory of that event now? And have a quick scan of your energy field and see whether the recalibration of one event actually takes care of a whole host of others, or at least lightens and makes the others easier, more manageable. And then when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Does anybody want to share or say anything about that small process? Was it helpful?
You know, at the moment, I have traveled in the reverse direction. So I reached to a conclusion, then I thought, no, go back. And then I found, oh, there are many other ways. And then I went back to perception. Perception, again, opening the doors of variety. So, change the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So true, so true. If you go back to the source, you can change how you travel and where you travel, and how much you enjoy how and where you travel. It's amazing. You think that the event predetermines the experience and the outcome, and it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It's so dependent upon our history, our perceptions, the meaning we ascribe, and the conclusions we make. And we think that you can't go back and rewrite history. Oh, yes, you can. There is no historian out there that claims to know the absolute truth on history. You know, Hilary Mantel and all the other historians, they all say, you know, this is our perception of what happened. And so all historians convey the story of history slightly differently. So the event does not predetermine the conclusion and the memory, and certainly not the meaning. And you can see as we travel through this process that the only thing which is true in the whole, not true as in it is real, but true as in it is accurate in the whole process, is sensation. And that's why you don't want to be afraid of sensation, because sensation is the only bit of this whole process which is going to tell you the truth. And yet sensation is the thing we are all running away from, trying to get away from. when I say it's accurate but not necessarily truthful, it's because if I choose to think a thought that I am unlovable, doesn't make it truthful, but the sensations I create as a result of that will be accurate. So the sensation is always giving you accurate feedback. If I choose to think I am unlovable, my energy field cannot give me the sensation of you are bad at maths. Yeah? You plant an acorn, you get an oak tree. You plant. For years I've been saying you plant an apple pip, you get an apple tree. But then after listening to a program on apples on Radio 4, I now find out that no, apple trees come from pips. They all come from rootstock. They're all grafted. Yeah, messing with my analogy, how dare they? I think, is that true of orange trees also? Do we know? Anyway, I've been using apples and oranges for years. Now I'm frightened to say anything about them. But acorns and oak trees I'm pretty sure of. Yeah. So, you know, hopefully this is demystifying a lot of what happens to you. Is it? Or is it complicating it? This is as simple as I can get it. I can't boil it down anymore.
The main problem comes that the whole process is very fast.
Yes,
And that's
totally.
the breaking is
Yes.
coming to each stage is, oh, no, I have come to a conclusion.
Yeah, don't get in the way of my conclusion. I'm already there. Yes.
Going
Yes.
back a bit.
Yes, it's so true. It happens so fast. This happens in less than a second. Yeah? It's just boom. Yeah? Like, for instance, if you see a shape like that in the grass in summer, and you live in a country that has snakes, you will go oof like that, even if it's not true. Yes? You woof, and that comes immediately. You don't stop and think, there is a S-shaped shape in the grass. I wonder what that could be. It might possibly be a snake. I wonder if I should jump. You've got the oomph before the thought. Someone asked me to say something about precognition, which I can show you tomorrow. Yes, this is happening very quickly. You raised a very important point, that we don't want someone to come get in the way of how we've stacked it all up. I've just stacked all of those logs in that pattern, thank you very much. Don't come and tell me it needs to be rearranged. We don't want anyone to mess with our perception. That's my history. This is real. My childhood gives me the right to have this sensation and this perception. Don't you get in the way of that and tell me that can be different, because it would make a mockery of everything that we've held to be true. Why do we not want this? We're going to get onto this after the break. We don't want this interrupted because it messes with our sense of self. The I doesn't want any help, thank you very much. It's made its conclusions, it's got its memories. Don't you come along telling me any different. That is why the role of willingness is so important, openness. We have to be prepared to even, remember I said in the little meditation, just entertain the idea. That opens the door. Just entertain the idea that your perception might not be accurate, the meaning might be heavily skewed, and therefore the conclusion might be way off. Just entertain the idea, just be willing. So sensation is our friend. Now, here I am, just one person, I'm the only person in the world, and I can move around fairly freely, and even though I've got to somehow make friends with myself and my own creation. That's as much as I am challenged with. But then maybe I arrive in a country where there are other people, and then suddenly not only have I got to make friends with myself and my existence, but now I've got to take another person into account. And this person might also be having a journey trying to make friends with their self and their existence. And now you can see the whole thing starts to get a little bit complicated. So how does that process work when we move into relating? Does anyone think they have issues with relating? Not at all. No. So, there are different relationships. We have relationships on all of these levels. The relationship with the self is the microcosm which determines the macrocosm. So those people who say, and funnily enough, like all of these things, it's just there are worlds within worlds. This comes back round to this. So in some ways, those are synonymous, and in other ways, we can stretch them out. We imagine that they're not, but they actually are. So sometimes you find people who say, I absolutely love existence. I have total faith in God, but they do not like themselves. Yes? There are people out there like that. I've met plenty of them. Lots of spiritual seekers. You'll find lots of spiritual seekers. You know, oh, I love life, I love God, I love the angels, I love Mother Mary, I love Jesus, but they can't stand themselves. And they have a questionable relationship with others. Yeah, they can't handle the world. Do we know anyone like that? Yeah. There are other people who love themselves. Huh? We even let them run whole countries. They love themselves. They are so important. I love myself. It's all about me. But they have no consideration for others or the world or, you know, the sanctity of life. So we have to have relationships on all these levels. Those people who are off-grid, I said earlier, they are not pretty much challenged by others. Although one couple, they were all in couples, funnily enough. And I thought, you know, wow, that's an interesting relationship where there's no other feed-in to your relating other than this one other person. And you know, they all seemed very content with their situation. They had chosen it. It wasn't imposed on them. But I thought how different that is, that setup, completely away from society, completely away from even community. Some of them had no neighbours for hundreds of miles, and just one other person. I thought, what happens if you break a leg or have a heart attack? It's basically curtains. You could feed your spouse to the grizzly bear that goes past. The relationship with self, I could have drawn it differently, actually. I could have drawn it like this. The relationship with the self is there. You can draw it both ways, like this. And you could say that this is the relationship with the self, which encompasses everything else, or you could say that your relationship with yourself is projected onto all these other levels. So, the bits of ourself that we don't see, because our viewpoint is slightly obscured, gets projected onto our world so that we can see it more clearly. Now, this is a device, a human device that we're all fairly familiar with, the idea of projecting onto others. The bits that we don't like about ourselves. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say it's the bits that we don't see about ourselves, necessarily the bits that we are ignorant of. They get projected onto others. It also gets projected onto our world. So we can have attitudes about our world that don't work for us, but they're saying something about ourselves. If it were the world that were at fault, everyone would feel exactly the same way about the world, and they don't. So you think you're talking about the world, you think you're talking about other people, but you're actually just advertising what you feel about yourself. Yeah? A judgment on the world. You may see something in the world, but if you have to judge it, it means that there's some aspect of yourself which is in judgment. Why do you want to be in judgment? So life, you might wonder what the distinction is between these. The world is kind of like our human-created world, the world of, commerce, religion, and travel, and all of that stuff. Life is more kind of what I think of as being nature, and existence is the totality of it. And some of us are fervently trying to have a relationship down here and avoiding one up here, or vice versa. We are only concerned with ourselves and our immediate group, and that as we get out here, we kind of lose touch. And those people who, people who are very, very strongly patriotic, find it difficult to relate outside of myself, and my fellow kinsmen are allowed inside my relating circle. But these guys are somehow foreigners, those people who say foreigners. Another thing is when we have sports teams, we're very strongly identified there in the group stage. But we can be very tribal about the fact that it is this group and not that group that we identify with. So there's lots of ways that we can play out this whole drama of experience in the field of relating. Do we have a choice as to whether we relate with ourselves?
Yes.
Do we?
You can be completely unconscious about it.
Yes, I see what you mean. It's funny, isn't it, this choice thing, because it always brings up this thing about there's a choiceless choice, like the gateless gate. You're right. So I was going to say no, but you said yes, and I agree with you. No, because you can't avoid it indefinitely, I was thinking. But yes, we can certainly seek to avoid it, and many of us do. Who here would say that they have a trouble-free relationship with self? Let's think about that. We're talking about our being, aren't we? And yes, I know all the arguments about the fact that, our being is really collective being, it's all God and all that stuff. But if that were the case and we walked around saying that's all God, we wouldn't have a problem in the first place. So let's not use that as an excuse not to see something really, really, really fundamental. We want to know how we're going to arrive at systemic change. This is where the rubber meets the road. Because if we can't make friends with our own being, which is the only one we have, the only one we really have a say over, what influence can we expect to have on the world? Why do we want the world to somehow be different when we haven't got ourselves sorted? So you can see that all of these levels are just extensions of the same relationship. So like we showed you in those circles that went out, how the maps were stacked together, the scale of systems. This is a scale of systems. So anything that you don't see here, what's going to happen to it as it goes out into the world? It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to scale. So we have to attend to this. So that's why I say it's not optional. Because we cannot expect there to be light in the world if the self is projecting and magnifying that darkness out. It's one system. It's one system. It doesn't operate, oh, I'll do it this way for this person and that way for that person. This is just the mechanics of it. What do we imagine we need to do in order to make peace with ourselves? Just give me some answers.
Be conscious in every moment.
Be conscious in every moment. Some people could be conscious in every moment of their pain. What's it going to take? Can you even imagine? Let's start there. Can you even imagine who you would be with no issues around yourself?
I think you've got to look at the things you don't like about yourself,
Yeah.
and then be aware when those... Look at the things you don't like about yourself, and then be aware that that particular thing you don't like about yourself is happening now. That's the first thing, is to notice that it's happening, and you're not being the well-being of yourself isn't as much as you would imagine it to be so. And then, having realised that, then try to avoid that or remedy it in some way. So you've got to notice, accept, if you like, first of all, there's something there that isn't good that you're doing. And once you know that, then you can remedy it.
You can make a different choice, yes. So notice and accept. What David said it, you've got to be conscious. If you want to notice and accept and do something differently, like we had on the previous sheet with experience, you have to be consciously present.
You said that the thing, that which we project onto others and the world and life and existence, we don't see it. So, yeah, I'm not sure what I project on. And I'd like,
I think a lot of people are not sure of what they
so
project.
then, yeah, so
The extent to which we are not sure what goes out into the world is the extent to which, not that we don't know if we look, it's the extent to which we don't look. It's the extent to which we are off duty. If we are present, we can notice our discomfort and notice where it's coming from. And then it doesn't get projected out into the world. But the extent to which we project shadow into the world is the extent to which we don't look. And when we don't look, we can't see. And we can only look when we are consciously present. And accept. Are we, when we've got no more negative thoughts ever, no more negative patterns, are we then perfect?
Yes. If you clear your subconscious, if you're stating it that way.
Yeah.
So when there's nothing lying dormant in my subconscious, and I'm completely conscious in each moment, then I would imagine that would be a state of enlightened being.
State of?
being enlightened.
But is that perfect? Martina thinks there's one coming.
I do not believe in perfection, and I do not think that in order to become
No wonder you
better,
got thrown out of Germany.
they threw me out.
Yeah. Passport cancelled.
And in order to accept ourselves, we do not have to remove all negativity from ourselves, because how would we be able to do that? We have to, oh, thank you. Maybe they might allow me back in now. Did I get your approval?
No.
No, it's really, it's about, like you have a dog, and you love it, and you see its flaws, and it's really, it's not really obedient, and it's a bit dirty, and it can be a pain in the ass sometimes, but still you love it, because it's your doggy. Maybe your children, but this is a bit more complicated, so I leave it out of this equation. But to ourselves, we're just not willing to extend the same kind of gentleness and acceptance. For us, we think we have to fulfill a certain pattern, we have to fulfill certain expectations in order to be really good and perfect.
Very well said. There is no correlation between being what we think is good and a state of perfection. There is no correlation. It is much, much, much more around the sense of, as we notice these things in ourselves, we just look at the mechanics. We just say, oh, look, I had that thought, I created that feeling. We don't have to then load it up with the meaning about what that says about me and I and all of that stuff. We give ourselves these massive hurdles, and then we give ourselves a hard time that we can't overcome them. Yeah? We create problems that don't exist, and then we beat ourselves up that we can't surmount these problems. So however, when we subscribe to universal principles and when we log on to our universal being, it is the same universal being. We all share one. We don't get an individual one. Otherwise there'd be lots of gods. There's only one existential beingness. So that is all it is. And as that light shines through us and our individual choices, it creates different patterns. So you get those lovely, those beautiful Arabic lamps that have those very intricate patterns, and there's loads of different patterns. And as it's the same light in the center, but it shines through a different template and creates a different pattern. We are all unique patterns. We have the same light shining through us, and we are all creating these lovely unique patterns. And that is the simplest way I can show you. And if there is something that we are doing, we are shining a light using our creative powers to create some kind of contraction, there is no existential benefit to saying, I am somehow fundamentally flawed or wrong or bad, or that I will arrive, if I can just get rid of that, I will be in a state of perfection. It doesn't work like that. It is counterproductive. We just need to see, oh, look at what I'm doing. And then it's a very pragmatic decision whether we want to continue. We always make it so emotional, so personal, the whole thing, And that we are going to cover after tea break, the I. Be afraid, be very afraid.